Good afternoon. Welcome to our monthly Dalim Tips and Tricks webinar. My name is Mike Moscato. We're going to go over using user actions in ES today. I thought about doing this a few weeks ago and kind of look back, and we did a webinar on this 6 years ago. But, you know, things change, features are updated, you get fancy new things showing up, and if nothing else, it's not a bad idea to do a refresher on this. User actions, for me, are one of the best features in ES. If you've been on webinars, we always show the screen, right? If you want to get the thing to fit, hit the button, it fits, you'll be happy, you'll see everything. So hit that scaling thing, get that stuff on your screen. So what do we want to go through today? Now, what are user actions? To me, they're a way to escape outside the box of your normal document workflow. I mean, there's a document workflow. Whenever you register files into ES, they go into some sort of workflow. But the workflow they're assigned to, the way I look at it, that workflow is a dictatorship. It tells you what you can do. You know, the steps, tools, approval schemes, so forth that are defined in there are the roadmap that file is basically been sent down. Now we know you can have all sorts of extra options in there. You can have some call whiffle steps. You can have milestones that have job tickets associated with them, so you could, you know, choose different options. But at the end of the day, you're still restricted to the logic that's been defined in there. I'm sure someone could create a document workflow that has infinite possibilities. That person should be congratulated and probably sent to a mental asylum afterwards. So what the user actions give us, for my money, is they give us freedom. If you know, even if there's a feature within your workflow that maybe didn't work the way you wanted, maybe someone chose the wrong option, instead of backing up in the workflow, you run a user action. So the status in the workflow doesn't necessarily have to change. How do you do user actions? Well, that's why we're doing the webinar. And it's easy to say it's simple. Some of them are very simple, but you know, as we'll get into later, there is a fairly complex string of connections you have to do when you start involving job tickets and ES workflows and twist workflows and all that kind of good stuff. And when should you use them? You know, as the mood strikes, right? Really, I think you should use them as often as possible. No one wants to live in a dictatorship. Here's what we're going to go over. We're going to look at the UI real quick. Restrictions for certain types of user actions. Two built-in ones that I think many people may be familiar with are the crop and convert and the contact sheet. We'll hit those real quick, although the contact sheet has a couple of new options that are kind of neat. Grouping is an important concept in user actions, and you have to watch out if you use Twist via ES Connect. The script option is an interesting way to hide and present user actions only to the chosen few. And as I said, we'll kind of go through a scenario where we look at how we connect all the pieces. Look at a way to mess around with triggers. And there's an approver setup option that frankly I never really played with before, and I think it's one of the sillier options they have in here, and I'll show you what it does and why you should probably avoid it. And of course, I'll say various stupid things over the course of the webinar. So let's get started. Let's put that workflow away. And let's just start by looking at the basics. Here's a user action. Now, things to be aware of. Let's say I choose a document user action. What does it do? It obviously acts on documents. Workflow based means I want to push it through some sort of ES workflow. And you can see I got a bunch of them in here that I may choose to use. Target, where is it going to go? Basket is typically what you use if you want to just download the thing. You can push them into your own private collections. I'll show you an example of that later. I think the workflow driven is one that's used most often. It's an important concept to remember, though, that when you use workflow driven within ES really isn't concerned with updating any information on the file. When you use workflow driven, what you're essentially doing is saying, run this file through the logic of the user action and do whatever you're going to do, but my file within ES, it really doesn't really know much about it. As opposed to source, which after you run it, will update the file in ES. That's a very useful one, and it's a dangerous one, and we're going to go over later how you have to beware. And this is another important one to keep track of. When you run the user action, do you want to run the original file that was updated before perhaps it was normalized and reprocessed, or do you want to use the current working file within ES? Grouping is one we're going to go over. Grouping is a way, if you have, say, selected 10 files, grouping them sends them out as one bundle, as opposed to running 10 different tasks. Important to remember, if you choose any of these other guys, say project, notice the grouping option goes away. Project user actions by default are always grouped. Notice also, if I go to the workflow action, I've only got 2 project workflows on here, but a project user action has to use a project workflow. Same with a section user action. It must use, I don't even think I have a section workflow on here. No, I don't. Oh, I'm on the wrong ES server. I'll get on the right one in a bit. I've been bouncing between 2 ES servers. Notice also, section user action, no grouping. It's the same with all these other guys. Job variant is versions, form is form. And the other thing to remember about all of these guys, with the exception of the document user action, these guys, section, project, form, job variant, are dependent on files being in a flat plan. Now, form, section, version makes sense because you're not going to have versions, sections, or forms unless you've done some sort of impositioning or used a flat plan to organize your pages. But project also requires files to be in a flat plan, and I'll show an example of that later on. This guy here, this thing called user action production list, I'm going to save that for last because he is a real doozy. So let's get started, and I'm going to go over a couple of the built-in user actions that, you know, if you play with ES, these are so common you might even forget that they're user actions. For instance, it's a PDF. We're just going to go to the crop and convert guy, and you know, right off the bat, it shows the wrong file. Let's choose this file. If you run the crop and convert on a PDF, what you'll notice is by default, it will crop to the trim box. So notice the area that's cropped. And if I do nothing else, I just say, hey, once you crop that guy, you trim, the default, it's going to give me a 72 DPI JPEG that I can open up and marvel at how wonderful it is, right? Now that's really no different than what you've seen in ES over the years. But one thing they've changed now is we go into the same guy, and you know, let's say I want to extract that image from this PDF. Top right, there's that little button. So you can see this pulls out a much more extensive job ticket than we're used to seeing in the earlier versions of ES. So now if I chose, I could choose another file format, change the resolution. And frankly, I've always thought the Moray reduction was a better algorithm than the nearest neighbor. So again, the basic steps in this are really no different than what you've seen in the past. And there's my cropped image that should be 144, which he is. So, you can automatically crop to trim. You can extract an image from a PDF, use the newfangled job ticket. One thing you'll notice when you look at that job ticket that pops up, some of the settings in here, really, if you're familiar with Twist and the image action tool, things like scale proportional, making an image based on a certain pixel width and so forth, that's pretty much kind of out of the image action tool set in Twist. But I think that especially for the image width there, I think they have some work to do with this little job ticket. For me, it's inconsistent, and I'll show you later how to create a user action to do the same kind of functions through Twist. And in fact, like I said, I'm on the wrong ES server. There's one other thing to point out about the crop and convert. Let's just go in here. If you don't want to mess with, all that extra business in the job ticket, you can just set up the ticket to just do the basics. Choose a format, choose a resolution, go with it, and it'll override the basic settings that are here. So, if you don't want to look at that, you just want to do some really basic stuff, you can just set the job ticket up with those guys, and you're good to go. Okay, let's look at the context sheet, because this, I think, has some interesting stuff in it. Let's see, we'll go here. Here's 4 PDFs and context sheet. Now, the UI in here looks a little different because of the way they've built the job ticket, but the basic functions are pretty much the same. Let's see, I'll just set these guys. And what this is going to give me is a 2x2 context. It only shows 4 files, so this is going to be a pretty simple file. When you're running these things, you should always keep your eye on the basket down at the lower left. It's going to give me my PDF. Oh, I don't want to, that was a boo-boo. I told it to open it in Firefox. That'll work. Now, that looks pretty basic. It doesn't really look any different than what we're used to seeing. It gave me the files, the file name, but notice if I hover over it, there's a link. That link is the equivalent of a shared link. So now when you get a contact sheet, any file in there, you automatically have a link to it to open it in the ES viewer. That's a nice feature. And, you may say, well, it gave me all 4 of those images. It would have been nice if I could have opened them all up at once, right? Now we know we can do that in ES. If you select 4 files, you could go to sharing, share document, view. This is fun, right? Who's going to view it? Say, okay. Then it gives you this link that you can email to somebody. Well, yeah, we can do that. But do I want to do that? It'd be a lot simpler if we could do 1 click. So we've got a user action. Hopefully I'll choose the right one. I've got a couple in here. Oh, what did I call it? Called it something stupid. I'll find it. called group something. Let's look down at the bottom, see if it's down there. Share the group. All right. So assuming you can find the user action, right? Just click it. Now that is driving a ES document workflow that should share out to me a link. So now if I click the link, instead of it just opening one file, now I got all of them in here. Now again, that feature isn't necessarily new, but the fact is, if you want to do that sort of thing, it's a lot quicker to do it through the user action than to go through the sharing option, where you have to do all those clicks. And I'll also point out that I know Brennan has done some good work doing that sort of thing by calling a user action with the API. Now, that particular routine he runs, we could probably spend a half hour going over it. Maybe, he should do a webinar showing how to do that. So here is the second new feature in here for the contact sheets. Now, what are we looking at? We are looking at a smart view. What do we know about smart views? We know that we can present information in the smart view based on metadata that we're interested in. So, since, I like to look at my cameras, I've got the file name, the camera make, the camera model, the make, and the time when the picture was taken. Now, this could be any metadata, it's just, I decided to do it like this. But there was a request, I don't know how long ago this was, might have been a couple of years ago, for the ability to create a contact sheet and put on the same type of information that you see in a smart view. So notice the bottom here where it says digitize time, make, and model. That is the metadata that was being shown in the smart view. Let's see, we'll go letter portrait. Make sure I display the name. So let's see what we get now. Open with Acrobat this time. So now you can see you can get the contact sheet to mimic the view that you see in the smart view. You can present the same metadata, whatever may be important for someone to see. And you can also see I've still got the links in it to click and open these things up. Now, I think it's useful to show how that is done. Thing to remember about user actions, if you want to get the job ticket to pop up, you have to associate with it a job ticket defined as a workflow job ticket. Here's my guy, contact sheet. If you look at the bottom, in fact, I'm gonna throw this away. I'll actually build it again real quick. It doesn't take long. So I'm gonna delete that guy. And so now, we'll make believe I'm starting over. I want to present metadata in my contact sheet. Choose this guy, metadata choice, chuck him in there. It always puts this dummy thing in there. We don't want him, we're gonna throw him away. So at this point, all you do is you start popping in the metadata you want to show up. I'll just put in a couple of ones you saw me using. Oops, I think it was date. Yeah, date and time digitized. Yeah, we'll just choose that. Check it to make sure it uses it. And let's see, the other one I had was TIFF info. And let's say it was just the make, right? Notice as I add them, they show up down here at the bottom. Hit the check mark. Now, you need to be careful when you do this because you might think, I added all my guys in there, I'm ready to go. but you have to make sure, and I did this the other day, I wasted a fair amount of time. You have to tell it where you're going to save it, and you have to save it to the contact sheet metadata set under the custom metadata property. Then you save it. If you forget to do that, the UI will look completely correct. It'll look like everything you want, but nothing will get saved, and then you'll get the contact sheet. It'll be blank. Okay? That's contact sheets. Okay, we're going to look at how the grouping option affects the behavior of your user actions. Grouping is this guy, enable grouping. First, let me make sure I have, yeah, I got to get the twist editor open because we're going to push some files to it. Oh, I should have had that open. Okay. So I mentioned earlier that if you're on a project workflow, it's just going to push out everything that's in the flat plan. So let's go to this guy. We got a flat plan full of files, 70 of them. So let's say I need to send all these files out somewhere. I need to FTP them to somebody. Maybe they were sent out before, somebody lost them. I just want to push all these files. So if you're running a project workflow, you don't have to select anything. You don't have to select any files. If you're selecting files, it's because you're running a document workflow. So I'm going to run action send files. That's 70 files. You'll see them running here. Notice 70 files shows only one process in eTwist. And if I go and I look here, although it was one process, there's all 70 files from the flat plan. So you can see for something like this, a pretty basic workflow where we're not really reprocessing the files or anything like that. We get one process in eTwist, only one hard worker used for 70 files. And within ES, that's only one task. Now, you have to be aware, though, that if you're running through eTwist, and let's see, I think this is the workflow we want to look at. Yeah. For something like this, where you're actually going to reprocess the files and run through a normalizer, if you push a group of files in, you need to bust them apart. And you use this option in eTwist, split set of files. So that basically ungroups the group. And you will suddenly see in eTwist, if I'd shoved that whole job in, you'd suddenly see 70 individual files getting processed. Now that group feature is not only applicable when you're working with a project workflow. Let's say, got this one, let's see. Yeah, this is a good one. This is a user action to create images of a specific pixel width. So if I choose 5 of them, image for web, there's a job ticket. I want them to all be 960 pixels wide. What's interesting about this is when they get into eTwist, they did get busted apart, so they're getting processed separately. But because they were sent as a group, and I had it set to download when it's done, it groups them together. So I get a zipped file with all my images in it. And I would hope that he is 960 pixels wide, which he is. Another interesting thing, though, about that user action that I just ran, and this is can sometimes get confusing. That user action, as you saw, the target is basket. Basket is if you want to automatically download. You saw that happen. However, the workflow that it went through, this guy, not only did he return the files to ES to be downloaded, you can also set it up to, because again, this is an eTwist workflow, I told it to also park the files for me. So, let's say your user is in a hurry. He wants to get the files for himself, so he downloads them. But if you want to stash them for later use, so maybe other users can get them, I basically got a twofer here. I downloaded them to my own local laptop, and I could park them. Actually, you could park them back in ES. You could throw them on the file system or FTP them to the file server. So you can basically fork it to get two for the price of one. Now, we know that not everybody uses eTwist. If you use Twist with ES, you use ES Connect. Okay? So, question is often asked, well, I want to do this grouping thing with ES Connect. Well, let's try it. So that user action is driving a specific workflow, Action Connect. What is Action Connect doing? He is pushing to a Twist workflow via ES Connect. Let's try to push a group out to him. And let's go pages. So let's grab, I don't know, that many pages. And we're going to run. So far, everything looks good. We're ready to roll. Now, if you ever want to double check how a user action behaved, because you can see that guy kind of disappeared from the basket, go to your event log and go to, not the event log, just go into System Tools, User Action Monitoring. History. There's my guy. Now, what did I get? I check the WIFL log. Notice my ES Connect step got bypassed. You cannot use a grouped user action with ES Connect. The group user actions are only applicable with eTwist. Now, it doesn't mean you can't run a user action like this. In fact, I'm going to go back and I'm going to change that guy and tell him, all right, you're not grouped. Let's try to get it to work anyways. But you're going to now see another reason that using grouped user actions with eTwist has a definite advantage to it. You saw earlier when I pushed that project user action out, it was 70 pages in one task and one twist process. So let's grab ourselves, I don't know, 24 pages. Let's run that work user action again. And I'm going to jump real quick over to my devices. Now, since I can't group it, what happens? Notice the task queue. So now, instead of being able to group it and having, one task, I got 24. There's the Twist plugin. So not only is the group function useful when you're pushing to eTwist and running only one process, it's a much lighter load on your task queue in ES, one task versus 24. And I got a feeling that that workflow that I pushed it into might have a validate in it. So let's real quick see what's going on in there so we can free up that stuff. I could have swore I took a validate out. So let's go back into the editor, but this time we'll log into Twist and not into eTwist. There. Let's see what's going on in there. Oh, all right, I'm a dope. Those are already cleared. All I need to do is refresh the devices here. Bad ES person. Okay. So the takeaway here is ES Connect, no groups. eTwist, group, you can do it in one task, one process. There's one other point I should make. When you group files, when you get to eTwist, there's a list of variables that are automatically created. One of the key ones is it tells you how many files are in the group. Now, why is that important? Well, it can be important in user actions or workflows where you're trying to combine all the files, trying to make a digital addition. In the past, we always had to pass a variable that told Twist the total number of pages in the flat plan. Well, that was fairly restrictive because if you didn't have the flat plan filled and you ran it, you would not get enough files in Twist to complete and merge them. However, when you group files, you can, when eTwist reads out that group, it says, oh, there's 14 files in here. So when it goes to combine them, it knows exactly how many files it needs to have before it combines. Here's an example. Let's say you wanted to extract a story out of this job. So let's say pages 26 to, I think it's 39, are the story on this magazine. What is it? That's Motor Welt magazine, right? So if I just pick those pages, again, in the past, I would either have to tell how many pages I have in here, or I would have to do some sort of rejiggering to get it to behave. Of course, I should have kept eTwist open. Just annoying. But you need to see this to know the type of data that gets passed to eTwist when you run one of these bad boys. Oh, that's not good. Let's try that again. Twist editor. There we go, ES. Okay, so we have, I believe, yeah, no pages selected. 39, 26. It's the document workflow. And I'm just going to say pages to book. Now, we select any one of those files in there, one of these guys, you get this blizzard of information. It's all information of what's in the group. The one you want to know is group size. Group size tells you how many pages were in there. Now that I know that, if I'm using some sort of merge tool or whatever, I know how many pages to expect. And this thing's about to finish. So now what I just did is I extracted one story from that job and pushed it out as a single PDF, all pages in order. That's a handy thing to be able to do. That is possible with ES Connect, but there's a couple other variables you have to pass in order to do that. Probably don't have time to show that, but if someone wants to know how to do that, we can cover it. Okay. What you've probably noticed is that when I've been selecting files, I got a big honking list of user actions in here, probably too many. So you're probably familiar with the fact that you can control which user action users see by going into their user profile. User profile, customers, project. Go over here and just kind of control which ones they can and can't see. So you get kind of granular that way. But what if you wanted to make a somewhat more global setting to control who sees? And by that, I mean restrict a user action maybe to only one customer, or restrict it for use for only certain file types. To do that, we're going to look at the script option. This is a handy guy. Let's start with this one we ran earlier. If you click Activate by Script, you get this window here. So within here, you can create simple, like this, or more complex scripts that will enable or disable a user action. Notice what it tells us at the bottom. If we return 0, the user action is disabled. It'll show up, but it's grayed out. If we return 1, the user action is usable. If you return 2, it's completely hidden. So what have I done here? I've got a user action that's basically built to only work with images. If I stuck a PDF in it, it'd blow up. Basically, because I was too lazy to make it more open-ended. So what does the script do? It finds the name of the file. Then it matches it to this regular expression. If it has any of these extensions, it must be an image. So we return 1, which means he can work. If he's not an image, you shouldn't even have access to this user action. So this is action image for web, right? So let's go to that job with all the pages. So I'm just messing around and I go over here. Do I see that action image for web? No, I don't. Let's go, I've got a better folder in here. This guy. Now he shows up because he's an image. That's still the wrong folder. Let's go in here. There we go. I got some images and PDFs in here. So it's the same job. He can't use it. He can. So based on file type, you can restrict whether it's used. Notice this user action here. It says action retrapperizer. That's a user action that I've messed around with for fixing a file that needs to be rerun through trapping. But notice it's grayed out. I can't use it. Let's go up to Acme. And I must have a job in here somewhere. About this one. There we go. In Acme, action retrapperizer. He can use it. Cool. Let's go to webinar. Can he use it? Come on. Yes, he can. So you can see we can make it available to some customers and gray it out for others. But let's think about it though. Let's say this guy country store, right? He goes in here, he's messing around. He wants to retrap some files. He says, look at that, you got this retrap thing. Oh, boy, I screwed up. Let's go back. Oh no, let's do this. He sees it and he uses it, right? And you find out that guy isn't supposed to use that thing. You need to take it away from him. So for that user action, what I've done is you got a simple array here. Within the array, you list all of the users that you want to make that available to. And you capture the customer you're in. When you check if you do this index of function for an array, if the customer is not found in the array, it'll always return -1. So basically, if it returns -1, gray it out so they can't use it. If it returns 1, which means it actually found it in here, make it available. So these country store guys, they weren't supposed to use it. So let's take them out of there. Now, here is a quirk in the UI. You just saw me make a change to it, right? I need to save it. Save button is grayed out. I can't save it. So what you typically have to do is you have to go to some other setting, toggle it off and on. It's kind of dumb, but you got to do that to get it to work. So let's see if that country guy can still use it. He's going to go here. He can't use it anymore, but he still sees it, right? You're tempting him. So frankly, I prefer hiding it. The way you hide it is don't return 0 for the can't use it case, do a return 2. And again, if you look down at the bottom, it actually guides you as to how these things are going to behave. Save it. So now Mr. Country and everybody else who's not defined in there, they don't even know it exists. So to prevent temptation, don't show it to them at all. And let's just do one more in here. I think I had another example. Nah, I think you get the drift. It is, I mean, this can be, you know, any sort of script like this can use metadata. Maybe there's certain metadata properties you want to have active before they can use it. This is the other example. I've got one here that's a section user action. This guy. So this one has 2 values. The section name has to equal body, and the customer has to be webinar. So that's pretty restrictive. So let's go. Here's the webinar customer. I have a couple sections. If I click body, user action, section, distribution. For some reason, they don't want to use this on the cover section. And again, he disappears. Very handy. And in fact, it's frankly, I kind of like doing it this way better than with user profiles, because it's very quick changes and they're global. Because like I said, if we decide, you know, there's other customers that we want to be able to use in here, you can just add them into the script and save it and you're done. Very handy. Okay, let's look at one of the more important guys, which is source workflow. Let's see, what is the name of this guy? Should have had this. Ah, here we go. That guy. All right. Here's a job. Come on. Here's a file. Let's say I want to run a user action because maybe the color's wrong in here. I'm going to do something fairly obvious on it though. User action. I'm going to convert them to grayscale. Now here's an important thing to remember about a user action where the target is set to source. What this guy is going to do is he's going to update the file in place, because notice this file was already in the document workflow. Well, you can see the file is still at the same status, but we now have an updated file. In fact, if we go a step further, you double click it and view it. You say, yeah, I definitely got, that's definitely grayscale, right? So if we look at it and say it's good, we're going to approve it. And it's going to send it to wherever it sends this bad boy, right? So now that it's sent it, we'll go over here and confirm that ES approved the file from the webinar, source actions, and there's our file, but it sure isn't grayscale. So you have to be very careful when you use the source user action because there's an extra step that you have to run through to get it to behave. So let's go to this other folder. I'm going to run the exact same user action on it. And by all appearances, everything is going to behave the same initially. I'm going to get a grayscale file back. We're going to approve it. I think it's going to overwrite the other one. It's got the same name on it. Now, if we come back here and look, now we have the proper image. So what's the difference between the two? Here's the difference. And frankly, this is a difficult one to understand. I mean, even after discussing it with the Dalim guys over the years, if you have updated the file with the source user action, before you proceed and send it on somewhere, you have to put in the restore working slot step, and the stage name you have to call is the working stage name. That user action does not fully update the way ES has registered this file. It still thought that original file was the working file. This gets it to update it. Here's another important difference when you're working with user actions where the target is source. This is the main workflow here, right? And if we look at the top right, that's the name of my workflow, Wiffle, dialog, milestone. But you can also access the workflow that the file ran through for the user action. This is only available if the target is source. If you run a user action that is, the target is workflow or private collection or anything like that, you will not see the workflow show up here. It's only the source that will give you access to the workflow and anything you may want to double check on it. Now, that's kind of a silly example, but it was mainly just to illustrate the fact that, you know, you have to be careful about how the file, the workflow is set to access the updated file from the user action. But here's a more practical one. Here's a file that gets run. And we look at it in the viewer. We say, you know what, that's got a spot color. This thing is not supposed to be a spot job. It's supposed to be CMYK. Now, you could tell, you know, somebody to fix the file and send you a new one. But, you know, using twist and ES, it's pretty simple to convert a spot color to CMYK. So why not just have a user action do it? And let's see, what did I call this thing? Yeah, action source do-over. I want to update the file. And here you can see you can present yourself with a job ticket for how you want to process it. Maybe you know, you saw the earlier I had the one called retrapperization, right? So if you wanted to retrap a file, you could tell it to do it. Maybe you wanted to choose different PDF version on the output, right? But what I want is spot the CMYK. So let's run it. Should see that push through eTwist pretty quick. There it is. And again, this should update our file. Another important thing to be aware of when you use the target as source, you'll notice the workflow that this ran through, the user action workflow, has a preview generation on it. If you just run the twist or eTwist workflow, when it returns, it'll update the file, but you won't have a preview. So you should make sure you put a preview generation in these things. So now we should double check, did it really convert the thing to CMYK? Yes, it did. No more spot color. Now we're updated. There's one more very important concept when you're doing something like this, though, and that is the context. When you run the user action, which file are you going to use? The original file that came in before it was normalized, or the current file? Why is that important? Here's why. Let's say, and I should have set this up, but I think it's easy to explain. Let's say this file came in with a spot and it got converted to CMYK. In fact, that's what we have right now, is CMYK file. And let's say the situation was reversed. This was supposed to be a spot job. That orange color is supposed to be a spot. So let's say I said, hey, yeah, I'll run my user action on this. I'll fix it. So I say keep spots. However, let's say the context was current file. Well, the current file has already been converted to CMYK. So if I shove the current file back through this, there's no way to keep a spot because the spot is no longer there. The same thing goes with maybe a file that you ran, maybe the color management was wrong, or maybe the file was flattened, but you wanted to keep the transparency. Well, if you reran the current file and told it to keep transparency, it can't keep it if you already flattened it, right? So for these kind of things, you really need to have that context set to original. You should always remember that when you submit files into ES, it keeps that original unmolested file available for you to grab. He's always there. And we do the same thing with this for some of the digital edition workflows we use, in that if a file comes in as RGB, you convert it to CMYK, but in the digital editions, you want it to be RGB. It's kind of silly to give it the original, to give it the converted file, because then you're just converting it back to RGB. Why not call the original file that was in RGB so you don't have it going through all these gyrations from RGB to CMYK to RGB? So you should think carefully about context, especially when you're doing source object. Okay, so this user action here is a good case study in looking at how all the pieces are put together. And I run a little long, but I think I can finish this in about maybe 10 minutes, we'll be done. So let's examine what we have. It's a document workflow, workflow based. It's feeding an ES workflow called action do over. It's going to use the original file. It's going to update the object. So what is action do over? What is that thing? Action do over calls an eTwist workflow. Not only does it call an eTwist workflow, but it pushes variables to it that were defined in the job ticket. How is it that we get the job ticket to show up? Job ticket shows up because we've attached this workflow layout option. We attach the specific job ticket, and the job ticket has the metadata that we want to use. That all sounds so simple. That's the job ticket. There's the metadata that gets passed. I'm going to run through this real quick. Define the user action, right? Template type. Create the ES workflow. Make sure you link it to a job ticket, assuming there's a job ticket that you want to use. The best user actions have job tickets. Obviously, make sure the job ticket is configured with your metadata, and the job ticket type has to be workflow. This is a very important one. In fact, this is where people slip up. They've done everything right. This is the one point they miss. If you're passing the metadata from the ES workflow to Twist, the scope is workflow. And the reason that can be confusing is you're using a document workflow, and it may, the first notion would be that you would use page order or something like that. But no, the scope is workflow to pass job ticket metadata in a user action. Lastly, the eTwist workflow, you have to create the names of the variables that you're mapping to from ES. So these have to exist first. If you're using ES Connect, you don't have to do that. With ES Connect, you just hit the plus button, right? And it adds another instance. You give it a variable name and then assign a value to it. Here's the thing though. If we go backwards here, see if I can go backwards on this, this slide, yeah. If you start here, the user action is really the last thing you would create, because you can't point it to a workflow if the workflow doesn't exist. The workflow isn't going to exist unless you first create the eTwist workflow that you're going to use. Then you have to link the eTwist workflow into the ES workflow. And if there's a job ticket associated with it, you have to make sure you link the job ticket to the ES workflow. So the user action, you know, if you sit down and do this, he's actually the last piece you're going to do. You almost work backwards. eTwist, job ticket, ES workflow, then make the user action, and make sure you get your goodies sorted out here in terms of your target and your context. Okay, a couple more things real quick. You've seen when I'm going through these things, everything I've done is action type workflow based. There's another option here. It's called built-in actions. Built-in actions, from my point of view, are utterly useless. There may be an application for them. I'm honestly not sure what it is. Maybe if it's someone's doing a custom interface via the API. But if you look at them, reprocess, restart from selection, these are all options that are available within a normal project, for instance. Say I wanted to download a file, right? What I do? I just go download, right? But oh no, there is a built-in user action to download. Well, it's really no different than selecting download from the UI. Remember earlier I was talking about how you can do sharing and you have to step through all the steps. Well, there's a built-in sharing guy, but he just takes you through the same steps. So these guys are really just opening options that are already available within the UI. So the built-in options in the user action, I think I'd avoid them. I don't think they're all that helpful. Because like I said, you can do all this stuff straight from here. Okay, I have an example using triggers that I'm going to skip because there's one last thing we want to cover. If you want to see how to do triggers with these things, we can show you. What I want to go over is this tab right here. User Action Production List. Now, if I click that, it gives me the ability to add some users and assign them to a role. Then we think about it. Why do we assign users to roles? Why do we do that? We usually do it for approval schemes if we need to set up milestones for approval. Well, that's what this is. My workflow action is action gray and it's set to download. Look at that guy. In order to use that silly option, you actually put a milestone in the workflow that is being called by the user action. And to me, this completely defeats the purpose and the philosophy of a user action. Because watch what happens now. Let's see, let's get, I'm doing my silly grayscale business again, but you know, so it goes. You convert them to grayscale, it's pretty obvious you did something to it. So let's do this. Action, gray. Let's go. That should run through eTwist really fast. It's done. Fantastic. Let's download that guy. And you see it right there. And so why isn't it downloading? The reason it's not downloading is there's an actual approval milestone now associated with the user action. Now, again, maybe someone could think of a reason to do that. I can't think of one. And now you're left in a quandary. How do I approve it? I mean, it's the approval scheme in here that's in the normal project setup is not applicable to this. So then you start hunting and pecking. You go to your system tools, you go to your user action monitoring, and you notice there's an option called on approval. And there sits our guy. If I click him, got an approve option. Really? Okay, let's approve him. Once he's been approved, it should complete the user action. And now it finally downloaded him for me. There is my grayscale image after running through a user action that requires an approval step. It's, frankly, I don't understand why anyone would want to do it, but I'm sure somebody somewhere in some tiny kingdom somewhere wanted to do that. My advice, just to prevent anyone from messing with it and setting up a crazy workflow like that, is go to your user profile, go to your user actions, and get rid of that guy. Just hide him. Nobody wants to deal with him. Okay, I believe that is everything. If there are any questions, don't see any in here. So we will call that a day. As you may know, we typically do our webinars third Wednesday of every month. I think our schedule has gotten a bit skewed this year because of the all of those duo workflows that Dalim was doing a few months ago. And I know the last one we did was on the 4th because of some internal projects we had to work on. Whether the next one will be on the third Wednesday, keep an eye out for any upcoming invitations. I think Fred might be going over the job planning in ES6. Hope you have a good day. If you have any questions on what was presented today, let us know. And if you have any ideas on webinars you'd like to see, drop us a note. Try to put it together for you. Have a good day.